The views and opinions of this broadcast do not reflect the views and opinions of Armed Media, New Productions and its affiliates. Enjoy the show.
Teflon Pan Man. I'm the Teflon Pan Man. Ain't nothing gonna stick on me.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to All You Can Eat. It is the podcast about deliciousness. I'm your host, Rob Rosenthal, coming to you not only live, but coming to you from the great city of Miami Beach in Florida. Or as they like to say, the great state of Florida. Anyway, here with you for episode 97 of All You Can Eat. And I got to be honest with you, I'm excited about this one because this evening we have not one, but two guests. Raul de Molina, which I tell you, you can't really ask for anybody better to speak to if you're in Miami, because that man is not only a native of Miami, but he is a multi-Emmy award-winning television personality. I'm going to tell you more about Raul in a second. And also this evening, I have Danielle Nierenberg, who is world-renowned in her field, which is all about building a global community for safe, healthy, nourished eaters around the world. So two great guests. And we start off with Raul. Raul de Molina has been on television in these United States for nearly 3 decades. A multiple Emmy Award-winning co-host of the Univision Network's #1 rated news show, El Gordo y la Flaca, which he hosts with Lily Estefan and has been doing it since 1998. They're on the air every day at 4 o'clock, and that show is so highly rated that it has more viewers in its time slot than ABC, CBS, NBC, and Fox have combined, which makes Raul probably the most well-known television personality of any kind of Spanish speaker in the United States. So much so that people named him at some point one of the most influential Hispanics in the country. And he has been called the Latino Regis Philbin. So, ladies and gentlemen, let's start off this evening with my conversation with the great Raul de Molina. Raul de Molina, how are you? It is a pleasure to have you on the podcast.
How you doing? It's a pleasure to be here to talk about food, travel, whatever you like to talk about.
Oh yeah, that's exactly what I wanted to talk to you about. I wanted to start off, before we get into food and travel and talk about Miami, I think it would be helpful to our listeners to give them a sense of your kind of background, where you came from, because I think your rise to fame is a fascinating story. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, I'm going to tell you, I was born in Cuba.
Right.
Left Cuba when I was 10 years old. I grew up in Madrid, Spain. I arrived in this country, Miami, Florida, when I was 16 years old. I went to high school here. I became the high school photographer for the yearbook. Later on, I went to college. I went to the Art Institute of Fort Lauderdale. Art, photography. I became a photographer, a news photographer first, in the 1980s in Miami, when Miami was very, very hot in news situations. There were riots here in the early 80s. There were a great football team, the Miami Dolphins, that is not doing so well now.
Correct.
The Miami Hurricanes. And later on, after covering large conflicts in Latin America, hurricanes and all that, problems in Haiti, Contras in Nicaragua, problems in Panama, a series Miami Vice started with Don Johnson and Philip Michael Thomas. I started taking pictures of that. And from there, I became like what you call a celebrity paparazzi. I worked for years for the National Enquirer. I worked for the London Sun, for the now that doesn't exist anymore, the News of the World, where Piers Morgan used to be at. And I did a lot of work for all that, covering Princess Diana, Princess Carolina of Monaco, and all the royal families from Europe. And from there, I landed on TV. And now I've been working on TV in something completely different for the last 27 years. First at Telemundo and now at Univision Network, But I have my own show every day for the last 22 years, 5 days a week, called El Gordo y la Flaca, the fat guy and the skinny woman, which is about celebrities.
That is a fantastic story. I love every bit of it, and congratulations, because I know, as I've told people, that you have basically one of the most successful franchises in television anywhere, but especially on Univision. It's just great what you've done. Now,
you know what? It's great, and I love food. I'm going to give you a little bit of my background in food.
Yeah, let's talk food. Sure.
In Cuba to the weekend, because my mother, when I was 5 years old, started taking me to all the best restaurants, and it was a highlight for me that I would go to eat to all these great places Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. And my mother was very proud of me that I could eat with 2 different forks and 3 different knives at the restaurants and order like lobster thermidor, and look what happened to me. Now I'm El Gordo and I weigh 300 pounds.
Well, let me tell you how much we have in common, my friend. I also like to tell people that I've had a love affair with food since I was breastfed. I remember my very first slice of pizza, and I have eaten at over 4,000 restaurants on 6 continents, because I used to travel around the world in the advertising business making presentations. But then when I was able to escape that, Raul, I basically have started to write about what I would call culinary tourism, and then also do the podcast, which is called, by the way, All You Can Eat. So we have the food thing in common. Now, I think that we have to talk about Miami, because as a guy that has been through Latin America about 100 times, I had many stops in Miami, and I must tell you that one of my favorite moments was going through the airport, because I believe it was Cafe Versailles, where I would get my Cuban coffee and my pastele. So,
look, I've been living in this city since I was 16 years old, like I told you before. When anyone comes to Miami, I tell them, you want to have Cuban food, you only go to Versailles. Versailles is in A Street, Southwest A Street,
right,
and it's still as popular today as the first day that is open. The first day that it opened in the 1960s. Today, people go to Versailles until 3 o'clock in the morning, then they open again, I think it's at 6 or 7 a.m. Every president in the United States has stopped at Versailles, and now they have different Versailles everywhere. They have at Miami Airport, I've seen they have 2 or 3 of them.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of I like strong, so I love the Cuban coffee, and I'm happy with a Cuban sandwich. Let's talk about the food scene in Miami for 2 reasons. Number one, because we both love food, and number 2, I'm going to tell you something. For the first time, this is almost a little selfish, Raul, but for the first time in my life, I'm going to be spending my winter in Miami. So I will be in your fair city in a month, and I will be down there for about 3 months. So I'm eager to discuss what's happening in the Miami food scene. Let's start off with this. This pandemic is a nightmare, una pesadilla, digamos, and it certainly has impacted among many other problems. It has certainly impacted the restaurant business. What's going down in the Miami restaurant scene? What's happening in general there, and how are people kind of acclimating to the new environment?
I'm going to tell you, and I follow this very close. I'm very good friends with a lot of the chef here, Michelle Bernstein, Michael Schwartz, and many others. And yes, it has been very hard for many people. And now they open the restaurants again, and I'm surprised that they open, because now they allow the restaurants to serve inside and outside at full capacity. Wow. And I'm a little bit worried about that. And Miami has 2 scenes for food. One, the tourists that come here every weekend, and they want to go to Prime 112, which is where all the basketball players go on South Beach, and I try not to go there. But the good restaurants that have been around, and they are not the scene. People go here a lot for the scene. And that's what they say, oh, this restaurant just opened, and I have people that come here from Australia, and I recommend them a good restaurant. They say, no, I want to go to the restaurant that I see on Instagram all the time. And I go, yeah, but that restaurant in Instagram is not very good. Right. Yes, but Jennifer Lopez goes there. So let's start talking about food in Miami. Look, since I opened the restaurants on the inside, I was extremely surprised at one of my favorite places here, Michael Schwartz, and it's called Michael Genuine. He now owns about 3 or 4 restaurants in Miami. I tried to go there about 2 weeks ago on a Saturday. And I called, there were no reservations. I drove in front of the restaurant. I know people there. I know Michael. I tried to call him. He didn't answer the phone. But the restaurant was so full that it was waiting us 1 hour to get in. Same as another one that he opened in Coconut Road called Tiger Tail and Mary, which the food is excellent. And they have added more tables, and they were at full capacity. This is not happening in LA or happening in New York right now. And I was extremely surprised.
You know, to be honest with you, it makes me a little sad to hear it, and I'll tell you why. One of the things that they've discovered during the pandemic, I mean scientists, is that one of the most dangerous environments that you can be in is in a restaurant that's crowded and inside, and people talking, et cetera, et cetera. And Miami, or Florida in general, is kind of having a difficult time with containment. So I can't tell you that I'm happy to hear that. They attempted in your city to install a curfew at midnight or whatever it was, but they don't seem to be able to hold that. So I'm, it's a little upsetting because, you know, the only way that this thing gets contained is if people are, super careful and not spreading. So I'm disappointed. But anyway, look, I'm not getting into the politics, just the safety factor. What about? Well, tell me more about Miami restaurants. What are your kind of favorites? Whether it's for, and obviously you have Versailles if you're going to have Cuban. In fact, while we're on the subject, Raul, tell the people what's in a Cuban sandwich, because I would have to say it's easily one of my top 10 sandwiches that there is. What's in a Cuban?
Okay, let's go first by the Cuban sandwich and then the places that they have the best Cuban sandwich.
Thank you.
In a Cuban sandwich, there is cheese. It's a sweet cheese. There is pork. There is ham. There is a Cuban bread that is toasted. There are pickles. And all these, it's put together, pressed together, toasted on the outside. The cheese melt, and it's magnificent when you take a bite. Now, there are two types of Cuban sandwich.
Yep.
One in Cuban bread and one called medianoche, midnight. The medianoche, it's a lighter bread that is like a type, not exactly an egg roll. It's a long, but it's like that. And when you toast it, it's a little bit lighter than the Cuban bread. And it's made in Miami in many places. I mean, it's a Cuban sandwich. Then they have the pastelitos, what you call them, which is like the pastries, the little pastries, or guava and cheese, or guava alone, or the meat pastries. And all this is sold in Versailles, in La Carreta, in different restaurants in Miami, or in little places that they only sell food and, Cuban food. And people have this throughout the day. And the good thing about a Cuban sandwich is you could go to Versailles and you see someone having a sandwich like that with pork and ham and cheese at 3 a.m.
Yeah, exactly. Well, that's kind of the perfect time, isn't it? By the way, I should tell you that, just because it occurred to me, I traveled really kind of extensively last year leading into the pandemic. I had been to 15 countries within the last year leading into the pandemic. And on the last trip, I came back through Miami, and I stopped at the airport in Miami. I believe I was flying on American. I don't know. But you would appreciate this. I found a place where there was like una abuelita, like in the kitchen, cooking. I could see her behind the scenes. And they were selling both mojitos and the Cuban sandwich. So I ordered that, and it was fantastic. I mean, the sandwich was fantastic. The mojito was so good, I ordered a second one. So I don't remember the plane ride home, but I thought you would appreciate that the place was owned by Gloria Estefan.
Oh, Estefan Kitchen at the airport, of course, very tiny. You were on American Airlines.
Yes,
right?
Exactly.
Right when you are at the terminal, it's American Airlines, which is the largest airline flying to Miami.
Yep.
It's a Stefan Kitchen, very tiny, and they do very good food there.
Yeah.
There is something called fried plantains, mariquitas, which are extraordinary. They come on a bag, and they make it a way that it's not even. They fry it, but they fry it, I think, on an air fryer, and it doesn't have a lot of oil. And once made out of malanga. Which is cassava, and they have all these things there. And it's very tiny, and you can have a mojito also, or a beer.
Yeah. I was very happy to find that. That worked out very beautifully. Tell me something else, Raul. As long as I will be down there for a while, in addition to the Cuban places, what else do you like down in Miami? Where else should I make sure that? I'm like you, by the way. I have no interest in tourism. I have no interest in crowds. I like genuine. I like authentic. I like real. What else do you like down in Miami for me?
I'm going to tell you the restaurants that you need to go to Miami right now.
Nope.
The new restaurants are open in Miami, and some of these restaurants open in the middle of the pandemic right now, and they are completely full. Let's start by, there is a new restaurant in front of the University of Miami on that South Dixie Highway. This is on the south, called Mamain. It's by a chef that has been very successful with another Indian restaurant in the Design District. Mamain is Caribbean food. I've been there twice. You can sit outside. They also have a beautiful dining room inside, and the food is amazing. The croquetas, the empanadas, the grouper. Everything that he's been doing there, everyone is talking in Miami about Mamain.
I like it.
He's from Jacksonville, Florida, from an Indian family. I believe he's from Mumbai, and he used to work at Michael's Union as a sous chef many years ago, and then he opened his own restaurants. Mamaid is a hot place to go right now. Now, there is another restaurant that everyone is talking about, and I try to go there on Saturdays. It's at the Raul Museum in Alapapa. The neighborhood is not great, but it's a very well-known museum in Miami, a private museum. And what they did is called Luque, Luke, Spanish food from the Basque Country. San Sebastian, that's one of the last trips I took last year before the pandemic, have probably more 3-star Michelin restaurants than any other small city in the world.
Yep.
They brought 2 chefs from San Sebastian. One of them worked at what I think is one of the greatest restaurants in the world, called Echevarri, in the Montas of the Basque Country. It's an asador, a place where they do a lot of the foods with wood and fire and all that. So Leku at the Raul Museum is fantastic. The paella, the croquetas, the octopus, everything. I go there at least once a week on Saturdays. I sit outside. The food is, I believe if they were going to give a 1-star Michelin to one restaurant in Miami, will be to that one.
Well,
it's really one of the hottest restaurant opening in Miami during the last 5 years.
Wow. How do you spell it? The name?
Luke.
That's what I thought. Yeah, that's what I wrote down.
No, I'm sorry. Wait, run. Lek. Yeah, Leku.
Okay.
Leku. Leku.
Oh, okay. Leku. Okay, perfect. Excellent. Tell me.
You go ahead. A couple other places that I like. I like Marco's Union. I have another place that he have in South in Coconut Grove called Tiger Tail and Mary. There is a great Chinese restaurant in Miami called Tropical Chinese. It's in a shopping center in South Day, Miami, in front of Tropical Park. It's good for dim sum over the weekend.
Right.
I think the dim sum there is as good as the dim sum in New York or San Francisco.
Nice.
It had been closed by the health department a couple of times on Saturday. For leaving the food without putting it in a counter when they deliver the food. Right. And the owner tells me, what I'm going to do, I have the people cooking here from China. I tell them they have to do this and they don't do it, but everything is fine. This restaurant has been around, I would say, for at least 30 years. And I think if you're in Miami, you want to have good Chinese food, you need to go to Tropical Chinese.
Right. I like the fact that it's in a shopping center. Sometimes you get the real genuine article when you go back there. No question. You've done, obviously, a lot of travel. You mentioned San Sebastian. What do you want to talk about travel-wise? I didn't mind Raul taking, that was a pretty extensive year that I had, so I was fine with taking off some time, but I'm starting to miss going places. I'm excited to get down to your city just because, I like Miami, but I'm just happy to get out of the house at this point. What are you thinking about travel and when we're going to go back to it? And I don't know, the whole thing is kind of crazy, huh?
This is very hard. We've been fortunate enough, my wife and I, we love to travel, and we've been to 107 countries. I count them every time I travel somewhere.
Nice.
Around the world. Our last trip, we were going to go to South Africa. We've been to South Africa a few times before, and we were going to South Africa to a place that we haven't been, the Kalahari Desert. We usually go to the usual places, the Kruger National Park. We've been to Namibia. We've been all the places, and we were leaving March 27. At the beginning of March, I even have an infectious disease doctor from one of the hospitals in Miami at my house for a wine dinner. He says, "Oh, you can go, everything is going to be okay." 2 weeks later, everything changed.
Right.
A week before we were leaving, we have to cancel the trip to South Africa. We couldn't go, and we haven't taken any other trip since. We went to the Dominican Republic about 3 weeks ago. But before that, I traveled for Univision to New York, to Los Angeles, to Houston, to different places in the United States almost every month. I'm on a plane every 3 weeks. My last trip for work was to Kobe Bryant's funeral in LA. After that, we haven't traveled anywhere, and we're not allowed to travel. We were going to go to Hawaii, that we go in the summer, either to Mykonos or Hawaii. We haven't been able to go. We decided to go finally after my wife was going crazy. My daughter was going back to Washington to a school. They say, we need to go somewhere. We went to someplace close. We went to the Dominican Republic, to Casa de Campo. We rented a house there. Everyone that worked in the house was tested for COVID the day that we arrived. They were okay. We were there for about 10 days. We came back. We were lucky that nothing happens to us. Wear a mask, a shield, and everything on the plane. Didn't go to the restroom. The flight's only 2 hours. It worked out well. Yeah. And, the last big trip that we took was to San Sebastian and to France in the month of April last year. Then in the summer, we went to Hawaii. But trips like that, international, and that was a food trip that we did to eat in a lot of the restaurants in San Sebastian.
Yeah, I hear you. Did you find that the plane travel, you felt safe on as far as the plane travel goes, huh?
No, I didn't at the beginning. I'm going to tell you why. Because the flight, American Airlines to the Dominican Republic, was completely full.
Right.
Coming back, they left people behind. They asking people to give away seats. And I was worried. I talked to doctors before I did this. They told me the way to do it. We were lucky. I will think about it twice. My wife was right. She didn't want to go to Hawaii because from Miami it's a 10-hour flight. Right. You have to take a 5 hour to LA, another 5 hours to the Big Island, and we were going to go to the Big Island because we like the Big Island. It's not that many people there. Right. And we usually go to a hotel or rent a house, and we had a house rented in the summer, but it was too far to travel. You know what they're saying? It's safe to be on a plane. I felt uncomfortable. I'm glad that was a short trip, and I'm glad that everything came out okay.
Yeah, I agree with you on that one as well. In fact, I'm going to drive down to Florida because I can, and because I need a car there anyway, so I can avoid the whole airport and airplane thing. Hey, let's switch subjects in the few minutes that we have remaining. And I know that I didn't forewarn you of this, but I'm going to ask you this: what is kind of the best advice that you've ever received?
In talking about traveling, or
no? You know what? Here's the thing. I'm going to leave it entirely up to you. I mean, just anything that you feel like you know that you got advice along the way, or that you would give to someone. Whether it's, and you can pick the subject if you don't mind, and I'll take anything you got.
Well, advice is my mother always told me something important, and it's very hard when you work on TV and you work with other people. Always tell people the truth. And I do that all the time, and I get in trouble.
Yeah, it's a funny thing.
And I'm going to tell you. No, go ahead. I'll answer now. Go ahead.
Well, no, I want to hear from you, but you make me laugh because I find that with television or with anything that you do, people do actually respond to authenticity. So, and I believe in the truth. I call it the brutal truth. But anytime you deal in the truth, it's exactly what you said. You get in trouble.
I'm going to give you a couple of examples right now. In my house, it all starts in my house. My wife gets dressed. We're going to go out for dinner. And I say, hey, Millie, what you have, my wife, I've been married to her for about 26 years. Mm-hmm. I don't like what you have. It doesn't look good. What do you mean it doesn't look good? You want me to tell you, okay, I'm going to lie. It looks great, Millie. That's what you want to hear. Right. I'm telling you the truth. It doesn't look good. I get in trouble for saying the truth. Then at work, my executive producer gets mad at me because I'm telling people sometimes in the chit chat, that's the show, hey, the cases for coronavirus went up, now it's getting worse. We don't know what's going to happen in the next 2 months. And she says, oh, you're giving people bad news. I'm not giving people bad news. I'm telling people the truth. She says, yeah, but you should give positive news. Okay, you want me to tell them that everything is going to be okay? Then it's fine. Everything is going to be okay, but that's not the reality.
No. Yeah, I think that people in general have a hard time with reality and with the truth. But again, we share that in common. I think at the end of the day, truth will come out, and it's all that really matters. And it's anyway. So we're in violent agreement on that as well. And like you, sir, I also have been married to the same person for it'll be 29 years. So I promise you that we do have a ton in common. But you are a giant, famous superstar in the Latino and Hispanic world. It is a treat to be able to speak with you in person. I thank you for your time. Any parting words, Raul? Anything you want to leave the people with? Tell people where they can, where they can find you.
They can watch Univision El Gordo y la Flaca Monday through Friday at 4 p.m.
Love it.
And also Central Time is 3 p.m. And I'm looking forward to see if we're going to do the Latin Grammys that usually is in Vegas. They move it to Miami. They're not going to have any people present. It's just going to be, but I'm going to be working there. And usually the host of the red carpet. And that is coming on November. And one of the big things that I don't know what's going to happen. I've been doing the December 31st show, the New Year show from Times Square for the last, I think, been 23, 24 years.
Yeah.
Every year I'm there for Univision. And right now they're working on maybe having the December 31st show from Times Square. There's not going to be any public. There's not going to be anyone there. But they're telling me that I'm going to go. And I'll be happy to go there. And I will risk it and go there. But I don't know what's going to happen now. Yeah. Because we don't know if New York is going to be opening in December if things get worse or not. So hopefully we'll be able to do the show December 31st from New York City. The new year coming in, the 2021, that I hope is a lot better than 2020.
It can't be worse. It can't be worse. Hey, everybody, that is Raul de Molina. Oh, that's perfect how that happens. I put on my Do Not Disturb until 10, and at 10:01 the phone rings. That is fantastic. Everybody, that is Raul de Molina. You can catch him on Univision every day, Monday to Friday. Raul, again, super big thank you. Appreciate the time. A pleasure to meet you, and maybe I'll catch you down there when I show up in Miami. That would be fun to eat together somewhere in your fine city.
When you come to Miami, I'll take you to a couple of great restaurants that are here, and the food scene in Miami have changed tremendously during the last 10 years. A place that will only be 2 or 3 good restaurants, now it has as many good restaurants as any other important city in the United States. So I will welcome you to Miami and take you out for dinner. Okay,
it's a deal, and I'll make sure that I'm able to reciprocate when you come back to New York City. We have some lovely restaurants there, as you know, even though I will be spending my winter in your city. So that's all good. Thank you again, my friend. Really super good to talk to you and to meet you. It's been an honor and a pleasure.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay.
That is Raul de Molina. Love talking to that guy. And next up, a conversation with a woman named Danielle Nierenberg. And Danielle is a world-renowned researcher. She's a speaker. She's an advocate on all issues that are relating to our food system and to agriculture. In 2013, Danielle co-founded Food Tank, which is a nonprofit organization focused on building a global community for safe, healthy, nourished eaters. And I can't think of, I suppose I could, but we have a problem in this country. Forget about the rest of the world. We do as well in terms of people, going without food. She is not only the founder, but she's the president of Food Tank and an expert on sustainable agriculture and on food issues. She's written extensively on gender and population, the spread of factory farming in the developing world, and innovations in sustainable agriculture. Here is my conversation with Danielle Nierenberg. Okay, hey, Danielle Nierenberg, how are you?
I am doing well. How are you?
I am doing fantastic. I understand that I have found you at the very moment in Baltimore. Is that correct?
Yep, that's where I live now, yep.
Well, I'll tell you, I feel like I can't really speak to what it's like to live there, but I know that it's certainly a good place to eat.
Lots of people say so. I don't eat seafood, but this is a big seafood spot for sure. My husband is in love with crab cakes from one of our local markets around here. So yeah, a lot of seafood is eaten.
Yeah, well, I'm sorry about you and the seafood thing because you're in the, obviously in the wrong place. Okay, so I take back everything I've said. All right, so let's start off like this. Let's start off this way, Danielle, which is that I want you, better than me, I want you to tell people all about Food Tank, what people should understand and know about Food Tank.
Sure. So Food Tank is a research and advocacy organization. And we were founded in 2013 with kind of this simple idea, right? To tell stories of hope and success in the food system and really get them to a wider audience. And this was based on the work that my co-founder and I had done previously when we worked at an environmental organization. Throughout my career, I spent a lot of time in the Global South. I was a Peace Corps volunteer. But from around 2009 to 2011, we traveled to 26 countries in sub-Saharan Africa, as well as Asia and parts of Latin America. And really, under this broad theme of studying agricultural innovation, and especially in sub-Saharan Africa, we found so many projects that if they had a little bit more attention or a little bit more research behind them, and certainly a little bit more funding to support them, they could be scaled up and out in different ways. And, these are parts of the world that are often, not thought of as places full of hope and success, but we were finding, that there was a lot there. And, the environmental organization I worked for, I went there right out of grad school and made them hire me. It was a place I'd always wanted to work. If you'd asked me when I was 16, it was a place that I'd always wanted to work, but it was still at that time kind of a gloom and doom organization, very focused on their problems. And what we wanted to do is sort of switch that around and talk about the solutions. So Bernard Pollock and I decided, with some savings and a little bit of credit card debt at that time, to start Food Tank and really, have a platform for telling those stories. And so we do a bunch of different things. We have a very robust news website, where we're publishing a couple times a day stories from around the world. We've published reports on things like true cost accounting in the food system or the role of family farming around the globe. We put out a book about a year and a half ago called Nourished Planet. And both pre-COVID and now post-COVID, convening has been a large part of our work. We've had summits all over the country. We also have smaller events that we call Food Talk Lives, that is both in Chicago and New York City. And, that obviously had to change because of the pandemic, but we've been, for the last 7 months, really interviewing food system and agriculture system experts on how the pandemic is really transforming the food system. So we've, talked to folks like former U.S. Secretary of Agriculture Dan Glickman, Chef Dan Barber, farmer Leah Penniman, and farmer Karen Washington, just getting their thoughts on what it's going to take to really make a food system that works for everyone. And so this year has obviously been a lot of change for us, but we're chugging along and trying to keep those stories and amplify the good work that so many individuals and organizations are doing around the globe.
Gotcha. Is it fair to say that the food system is broken?
Yeah, I mean, the food system is broken in a lot of ways. And why I think that is that there are a lot of paradoxes, right? We have more than 2 billion people who are overweight or obese. We have right now, roughly, and it's rising, 820 million people who are considered hungry. The pandemic will lead to millions more being hungry, unfortunately. And again, that will happen in the Global South. We have, enormous problems with food loss and food waste, even as people continue to be hungry around the world. So there are just lots of paradoxes. And what COVID has exposed is that the food system is is not just broken, but the parts of it that were sort of working were very fragile. You know, long supply chains were disrupted very easily at the beginning of the pandemic, and workers were invisible before the pandemic, and now they're less invisible, but their essentialness hasn't really been realized as much as it should be in terms of, making sure that they have a living wage or that they have the proper equipment to protect themselves from not just their own jobs, but the pandemic itself, the virus itself. So I think there are lots of ways that the food system could operate better and restore some of that strength and resilience that I think we need to have a food system that's robust and works for everyone.
Do you have, I guess the question is about the focus. I know that we're talking here about global kind of worldwide issues, but is there a focus in one part of the world, or is it more of a general kind of overall global situation that you guys kind of attempt to affect?
One thing we've tried to do is really bridge the global and the domestic and show how, farmers are dealing, for example, with the climate crisis all over the globe, and how, for example, I think farmers in the United States have a lot to learn from farmers in other parts of the world who have been dealing with the effects of climate change for a long time, growing different crops, developing different practices and innovations that can make farming systems more resilient. So that bridging, that sort of, trying to erase that divide that I think a lot of people feel like, oh, that's happening over there, that doesn't affect us. I think, especially with food, what happens in another part of the world affects food security in the United States. It affects our national security. And so I think those are things that we really try to sort of bring to the forefront.
Every time I'm going to ask you a question, you've already just answered it, because I was going to ask you about the impact. And I was going to ask you about the about the impact of the of the pandemic, and then I was going to follow that with what has been the impact of climate change, both of which you've touched on. So let me just do a quick. Let me get to one before you do, which is explain to people about sustainability and the importance of it.
I mean, sustainability is one of those words that's thrown around quite a bit, and it begins to sort of mean nothing. But when we're talking about sustainability in the food system, we're talking about environmental, economic, and social sustainability. Mm-hmm. So on the environment side, really food systems that are regenerative, that give back more than they take away. When we're talking about the economic side, we want to make sure that farmers of all sizes, small, medium, or large, are able to support themselves, that they feel they're being paid fairly, that they can, keep their farms in the family if they choose to, so that future generations can be farmers. And when we're talking about social sustainability, a food system that is just and that provides affordable, accessible food for everyone that's safe and healthy to eat.
Yeah, got you. Now, I think my sense is that so much of what it is that Food Tank does is, is advocating, pushing for change, solutions that are kind of actionable. So how do you do that? How do you put out possible solutions into the world in a way to make them actionable?
I mean, we're doing what we do now, having these kinds of conversations with you, writing those articles. We have 1.5 million followers on social media. Being a resource that's non-biased and trustworthy for individuals, so that they know that when they come to our site, they can find the information that they need. I think that's been sort of, missing in this very sort of turbulent political environment. People don't know who to trust. And I think being non-biased has helped us achieve a little bit of that, at least. When we had our summits in person, we would bring together food justice advocates on the same stage as agrochemical executives. We'd have Republicans and Democrats in the same room, even though they might not have, ever spoken to one another before. what we like to do is have really blunt dialogue and what I like to call uncomfortable conversations. I think we need to have more of them than ever before now because of what the pandemic has unveiled and because of the very inspiring uprisings that have happened over the summer as a result of the murders of people like George Floyd and Breonna Taylor. We need to get uncomfortable. We need to confront our own biases. And, food is something that connects us all. And if we can solve some of these problems, I think we can, on a broader social level, solve some of those bigger issues that are also affecting the world.
Yes. Now, let me tell you that I wouldn't characterize this as uncomfortable. This is more like direct, a selfish question back to my sustainability question to you. I'm a food guy. I write about it. I obviously I podcast about it. I cook it. And when I have the choice, I go into the fish market. I know you're not big on the fish, but when I go into the fish market, I have a choice between buying something wild or buying something farmed. As a cook, I always opt for wild. Now, having said that, is it safe to assume that farmed fish is obviously going to be more sustainable?
No, not at all, actually. And there
Good.
are people who can talk about this, like Chef Barton Seaver, much better than I. But farm fish, depending on how it's done, can have so many problems, including, sort of the same things that happen in factory farms on land can happen in fish farms. Whenever you crowd sort of, any species together in very close conditions, there's an opportunity for disease to spread. There's an opportunity for lots of pollution. Often those fish farms are, they're very resource intensive, et cetera. So it's, those choices that we all have to make and the choice that whenever you go to the fish market, they're very hard for consumers, right? They're difficult because we don't always have full transparency and traceability. And so, it's like saying, is organic always the best? It's not, and that's the same with fish. And sometimes wild will be much better and sometimes farmed will be much better. But it takes somebody like you who knows a lot about food or a regular consumer to really educate her or himself about it or their self about it. And that's a lot to put on consumers, especially right now during the pandemic.
Yeah, it is. And it is. Let's just leave it at that because otherwise I will insult 38% of the population. What is your now you can tell I like to ask the direct questions, but on this subject,
sure.
What is your position on foie gras? And I ask that in the context of certain states, New York being one, California another, either making it or considering making it kind of illegal based on the notion that the geese are being force-fed, which may or may not be the case.
Yeah, I mean, it's another thing that it depends. And I know my animal welfare friends are probably sort of yelling at me right now, but I think it's one of those things that depends. I know that there are farms out there that have figured out how to do it in a more humane way. And I know that there are farms out there who have not done it that way, without having sort of a specific, instance, I can't say yay or nay. I think, animal welfare has become such a bigger issue for so many consumers. So I think most folks, unless they're gourmets like you probably are, it's not an issue for them. But I think, the more that we can have, again, that sort of transparency, how are the geese actually raised? What is the process? How does this work? What is both the beginning and the end of their life look like? I think the more consumers know, then the better they're able to make decisions. And there are lots of chefs who I'm friends with who use, foie gras regularly, and those are people I respect and admire, and so it's not for me to say. Food is definitely a personal choice, and what I want is better animal welfare practices in place that can protect animals from unnecessary cruelty.
Yes, exactly. That and transparency. That's very good. Here's another one for you, but I'm not sure what the question is. I was just yesterday listening to the news. Not entirely sure who the source was, but I know that it was super credible.
and it was about the fact. Wow, talk about cruelty. It was about the fact that during the pandemic, because of the closure of certain factories, meat and steak and beef factories here in the United States, we've been importing a hell of a lot of beef these days from Nicaragua. And there are two issues that immediately stand out, which I would love you to comment on. One is that they are literally, because of the increase in demand in Nicaragua, are essentially taking over indigenous people's lands there illegally, so that they can produce and process more beef. And secondly, it arrives here in the United States in such a way where our system, I don't know who's responsible on this side, allows it to be cut up or chopped up or mashed up here and then reported as, made in the USA. So talk about transparency. Consumers in this country do not know that they're actually eating beef from Nicaragua that has been essentially produced on lands that was stolen from the indigenous people. I mean, this is ugly.
Yeah, it's very ugly, and I didn't see the story or hear it, but I mean, that's, I think it goes back to, how what you just said. We need that transparency in the food system, and it's missing. And when you're, importing food from other countries, I mean, this just speaks to the fact that we need better systems in place in the United States, so that those meat processing plants could have avoided a lot of the closures and the infection rates that they had that have been so high if, they were less concentrated. At one time in this country, we had smaller processing plants that operated very efficiently. They were more regionalized. If one person got sick, it didn't mean that we had to start importing food from a different country. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so I think there are lots of issues here, and the indigenous people during COVID, whether they're in the United States or in other countries, are suffering in so many different ways, whether their land is being stolen or they're not getting the resources that they need or that they were promised, here in the United States. So there's it continues to be an issue. And I think that's why the BIPOC movement, the Black, Indigenous, People of Color movement, is so important, to make sure that those folks understand their rights and they can take action, and that collective action that they've been taking, I think is so important. So yeah, it's sad though, and it is ugly, as you said before.
Hey, Danielle, tell the good people about this super prestigious award that you just won, given by the Julia Child Award, no less, given by the James Beard Foundation. What's that all about? Because I know this just happened within the week.
The Julia Child Foundation, awarded Food Tank and me the Julia Child Award, and I'm still sort of over the moon and can't believe that we're in the same company of folks like Jacques Pepin and Jose Andres and Mary Sue Milliken and Danny Meyer and others who have won the award before us. We're the only organization. I'm the only person who's not sort of a chef or in the culinary world, right, to have won the award. And I think they made their decision. They told me before COVID was such an issue. And they really wanted to make sure that the advocacy world and the research world was included as part of this award. So I just want to give them a shout out for seeing, all of these connections in the food system. And, so many chefs are not just chefs, they're advocates for a better food system, and being part of that group is really an honor for me and my co-founder Bernard Pollock and for Food Tank as a whole. We're a very small, scrappy little organization, and so this recognition has literally changed our lives. It will allow us to spread more awareness. It will allow us to have different kinds of events when we're able to do that in person again. And I think most importantly, food justice has always been a really integral part of our work, but it's allowed us, with the funding that it provides, to hire a food justice fellow who will concentrate, her efforts on sharing these stories around food justice that have been so inspiring not just over the last 7 or 8 months, but over the last few decades of what's been going on in the United States with, again, the BIPOC community and all the successes and efforts that they're making to improve, food and nutrition in their own communities.
You that award comes with a grant. What is it? $50,000?
It was $50,000. Yes.
What? How do you plan on utilizing that?
So as I just mentioned, we hired a food justice fellow, and it will help us have a series of food talk live events next year. Hopefully, knock on wood, when we're able all to congregate again in person.
Dig. And, I have spoken on the program previously about how the pandemic has not only kind of screwed the entire, restaurant and hospitality industry across the United States and I guess other parts of the world as well, but how that impacts the supply chain down to, where my fruits and vegetables and meats and chickens and all that kind of stuff come from. So make some suggestion to people about how they can, in their own communities, offer support to those who have been negatively impacted by the pandemic.
Well, I mean, for restaurants, I mean, you're right that restaurants have suffered, immeasurable losses, right? And it's not just the owners of the restaurants; their workers, whether it's line cooks or wait staff, have really suffered. So, doing what you can to support your local restaurants that are still open, by going there directly, not using services, delivery services, giving money directly to the restaurants for takeaway. I think that can be one way to help. I mean, supporting your local farmers. I mean, one thing that we don't talk about enough is that when restaurants closed, farmers lost a huge outlet for a lot of their produce, especially medium-sized farmers and small farmers all over the country. And so making sure that, you're buying local as much as you can, because that's really going to help those farmers who've had to pivot. And, I don't know how they did it so quickly, but, farmers who set up online markets, farmers markets who, did the same thing and are working very hard to protect their customers and also get them fresh produce and meat and other products. It's really been inspiring and amazing to watch all that. So, so buy local as much as you can, whether it's from your restaurants or your own farmers in your area. Yeah,
that's exactly what I was hoping for. Okay, that's good. So finally, Danielle, tell folks where they can go to find out more about the organization, how they might be able to help, chip in, see the content, et cetera, et cetera. Where do we direct people?
Folks can go to foodtank.com. They can sign up for our newsletter. It's completely free. There's, obviously we take donations, but we try to use them in really practical ways. And if they want to ask questions, they can email me at Danielle@foodtank.com.
Foodtank.com. And if you want, everybody, you hear that, Danielle at foodtank.com will answer your questions. Danielle, thank you for taking the time, but more importantly, thank you for the work that you do. It is vitally important and obviously appreciated and recognized by the highest authorities in the food business itself. So, congratulations again on the award, and thanks for being with us here today.
Thank you so much. It was really a pleasure to talk to you.
My pleasure to talk to you.
So there you have it, Danielle Nierenberg doing her work, Raul de Molina, Mr. Miami. I'm here to tell you I'll be back. I'll be back next week for episode number 98 of All You Can Eat. And between now and then, it's getting to be that kind of time of year when you might be considering some holiday presents for your friends and family. Consider my book, Short Order Dad, One Guy's Guide to Making Food Fun and Hassle-Free. Short Order Dad is a book based on my user-friendly formula to get the most taste with the fewest ingredients and the least effort. And aside from the 100 easy recipes, I mean, I tend to use, 5-6 ingredients max in most of them. It's a book that will help people who are interested in being better cooks. Because, I went to cooking school so that you don't have to. I lay out in the book what you need to know about the fundamental cooking techniques and all the different tips and tricks that I have learned to make the best possible tasting food at home for yourself, for your family, and for your friends. So think about it. Short Order Dad, One Guy's Guide to Making Food Fun and Hassle-Free. Let's see. Next week, we may even have on the great Carla Hall, who you may know from television fame. She was a co-host on The Chew, and she came to notoriety on Top Chef. Be talking with Carla sometime within the next week. Put that on the air. In the meantime, stay healthy, stay happy, stay out of trouble. And remember, life is short, so never waste a meal.
I'm the Teflon Pan Man. I'm the Teflon Pan Man. Ain't nothing gonna stick on